talk on microphone, so otherwise it won't hear it.
Cheryl, can you grab mine too, please? Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay, thank you.
I don't think they're in here. I just said
It's
Steve.
secret names. One that gets put out.
Like they beat no. Yeah. Otherwise, we could associate with the work. I'm only on the first round here, so I have no book or, yeah.
Gene, I'm gonna move this forward. There we go, thank you.
That's the first legal history.
Like that, Paul?
I can see that.
How are we going?
Good, good, how are you? Is everybody all right?
Everybody's good?
Good.
How are you?
All right. Okay, are we rolling?
Yeah, let's go. We're good, right?
Where'd she go?
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing.
Oh, Okay. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Special Community Development and Housing Committee meeting, January 16th, 7 o'clock. I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:04. Okay, so we have a couple purposes here tonight. First, we'll be taking a deeper look, I guess you would say, at the negative declaration report. We're going to be going through it. We would encourage comments. Okay, so,
There's a feedback issue, so
really, okay,
it'll be settled now.
okay.
We're good.
Yes, we're good. Okay. All right. So I thought it would be appropriate if Bartek kind of guided us through the report since he is absolutely the most familiar with it. I would encourage questions at any point if you have a question for him. Okay?
All right.
Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. So this is Resolution 11 of 2025 and Resolution 12 of 2025 that we are reviewing tonight. Both were reviewed in committee last week, and so I'm just going to focus on some edits that were made, especially to Resolution 11, based on the discussion last week. And I did send around a marked up copy of Resolution 11 of 2025 to the council, but I'm just going to briefly review the major edits. And feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions. So I'm starting in the whereas section. A new whereas clause was added to acknowledge that a description of the project and part 1 of the environmental assessment was distributed to all potential interested and involved agencies, those being the City of Kingston Planning Board, the City of Kingston Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission, and the Ulster County Planning Board. Those were sent for review and comment. A new clause was added to acknowledge that there were no objections from these agencies to the Common Council serving as lead agency for the review of the project. Another whereas clause was added to acknowledge that, in fact, the Common Council has noted iterations of this project, that project being the redevelopment of this area, for several decades. And in fact, via various planning documents, has encouraged the development of this area especially given that it is, again, in the heart of the Rondout Business District and close to established transportation and sanitary infrastructure. All right, now I'm going to move into the declarations. So a new section was added, section 4. And this section gets to the heart of a question that Sarah asked last time in a discussion that we had last time, which is we know we are intending to acquire the project site, and we have a conceptual idea of what the redevelopment would look like. We know that the site could accommodate approximately 200 housing units organized as a walkable neighborhood plan, fitting with the City of Kingston form-based zoning code. However, that development is conceptual at this point. We do not have a specific site plan review, site plan proposal that is in front of the planning board. Therefore, our review of the project is conceptual. And this section acknowledges that that is acceptable under seeker, and that once a concrete development proposal has been prepared, that proposal will also be subject to environmental review. And so if this type of review constitutes quote unquote segmentation in terms of the Common Council's review, it is permissible because no development will go forward until that project specific review is completed. Yes.
Am I correct in assuming that the conceptual plan presented in the long form is the full build out and the project will not exceed what's described in that conceptual plan?
That is, it depends, right? I mean, the development could change, right, in certain aspects. And in that sense, right, the review or the extent of re-review would recognize those changes. However, the conceptual view represents our understanding of the site, our understanding of the development potential of the site, our understanding of what we know is permissible under the zoning code, and also our understanding of, right, the intent of the zoning code in terms of development on that site. So it's a good approximation of conceptually of the development that's possible.
But it's unlikely that it would be bigger.
Right, certain,
Constraints you just described.
right,
to me.
it's
This is the max.
I wouldn't say it's the maximum per se, but it's a good approximation of the you know the degree of development on the site. Yes.
Yes, I have a question about the last sentence in section 4, where it says, as such review is no less protective of the environment. And I wasn't sure if that meant the project-specific review. Is that the current review, the segmented, possibly segmented review? So could you just explain
Right.
what that is?
Yeah, so I'm just going to repeat the question. I mean, I'm sorry, repeat the statement in the document, and then I'll explain it. So the specific sentence is, to the extent that this review constitutes segmentation, it is permissible segmentation because no development will go forward until a project-specific seeker review is completed, as well as detailed land use and other permitting. As such review is no less protective of the environment. So that is discussing this current review. Yep. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, yep. All right, I'm going to keep going.
I have questions about other documents.
Okay.
So are we finished with this, or I'll just
Let me
be
just
quiet?
finish
I'll just be
the.
quiet until you tell me.
Let me just finish the edits to these to the seeker resolution.
Okay.
made some slight edits to the impacts to land document to state that the development on the site was previously studied under the seeker review of the zoning code. Some additions were made to the traffic section, saying that the project does, of course, have the potential to add new peak hour trips, right? Because we're adding new housing units and also new commercial uses. However, there's a discussion here that this project, that impact will be mitigated by the project's location, right, in a walkable mixed-use business district. And we also added a discussion that relates to the environmental review of the zoning code itself, right, which states that with mixed-use development in the urban core, we don't expect that all new trips will just be made by car, right? That some of those trips will be displaced by walking, cycling, transit, and other types of modes. In the solid waste section, I added a note that the project will be served by the nearby wastewater treatment facility, and that we know that that facility has capacity to serve new housing units. Added a discussion of the stormwater controls that this redevelopment would be subject to. And then finally, in the conflict with communities' plans or goals section, I added, there was additions made to the long history of this site. All right, so the redevelopment of this proposed site was part of the city's 1961 comprehensive plan. That was the first kind of iteration in terms of the redevelopment of the site. Yep.
Can I actually go back to the solid waste
Yes.
question? Sorry, I wasn't thinking fast enough to get to it, and I didn't mean to interrupt you mid-sentence there. We have heard concerns about issues that have happened downtown. Does that not relate to the same idea of like, and you said you're confident, and I've talked to people who are in the business and are also confident that our wastewater treatment facility can handle this project.
Yep.
So how is that, those two things aren't related, is that correct? The fact that there are some issues, but the fact that we can also
Right.
manage this new development, is that true?
That's correct, right? So there might be some site-specific issues, right, in terms of the connections that would need to be made to the treatment plant, certainly. And those things can be managed, but generally speaking, we know that the treatment facility can handle new housing, like more housing units, more
Oh,
people using it. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard that too,
Yep.
so I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So I just wanted to, right, this has been, talked about now for well over 60 years. And so in some ways, what we're discussing tonight is nothing new, right? Because the city has been encouraging development on this site for decades. And in encouraging development on that site, right, the city has noted that it's served by infrastructure, right? In fact, some of the infrastructure was built out, including the roadways in the area, to accommodate more development, right? So that's been discussed for decades in various city planning documents. And then finally, there was new sections added on noise and light, that the project will follow all the construction and all residential and commercial uses will follow the City of Kingston's noise control ordinance. And then light, that the project's residential and commercial uses will follow the lighting standards of the City of Kingston's form-based zoning code.
Can I just ask on that one, how is that, how are we assured that those requirements will be followed?
The light ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, those would be part of the specific site plan where the actual lighting fixtures will have to be detailed in terms of their intensity and also location. Yep. Yep.
Thank you, Bartek. So section 5, number 7, talks about the vegetation and wildlife. I noticed on the Exhibit A that we actually will be maintaining most of that actually vegetated portion of the parcels. Is there anything further that's going to be done, or? Like the
In terms of,
impact is
oh, yeah.
minimal, but I don't know, are we going to be adding anything?
Right. So there are, that's a great point. So based on the standards in the form-based code, we will in fact be adding a lot of new landscaping, and that landscaping is basically required to be, native trees, shrubs, perennials, and the like. So it actually will likely to enhance the vegetation and wildlife on the site. Thanks.
Bit of another point too. And sort of the point 9, conflict with communities' plans and goals. I think the retail space of 30,000 square feet could certainly be a good opportunity for a small grocery store there, as that portion of downtown is a little bit of a food desert.
Absolutely. Yep. This will be an opportunity to add neighborhood serving retail.
Thank you.
Affordable grocery store, please.
Yeah, not Whole Foods.
So actually, on the same section, section 5, item 9, the site as a mixed-use, medium-density neighborhood. How do you define medium density?
In our code, there's there's a continuum of, going from rural to low density, some of the, low density residential, to some of the medium density residential, to some of the high density residential. For me, high density residential is kind of like maxing out the zoning code, which would be going up to as high as 8 stories, right? And 100% of lot coverage by a building. And so this would, for me, I mean, it's all relative, of course, but for me, this is a medium density development based on the development potential in our zoning code overall.
I thought that the density referred to the number of people per square foot.
Certainly, there's a scientific way where you could, look at, each census tract and calculate the density of each tract, and then, make this one's low density, medium density, high density. But this is this is specifically referring to some of the building typologies that are in our formally defined in our form-based code, and we're in the conceptual plan, right? We have a Main Street building, but then we also have some of the kind of lower density multiplexes on the interior of the property. And so for me, it's a medium density development. We're not covering the entire site with buildings, all right? We're not going up to the maximum height that would be allowed. That makes sense. It's all relative, right? For based on where you're standing from. If you were in Manhattan, right, this would be a low density development, right? But maybe if you're in Woodstock, they would consider this to be a high density.
So right now we're talking about 200 units, but we don't know if that includes 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, in which case there would be additional occupants. And that would, I'm sure, contribute to the density within that area. So I just have a little problem finding this medium which is what the
Yeah, I mean, I think the type of, I'd say this, right, the intensity of the development that is envisioned or conceptualized is entirely consistent, right, with what we see kind of in the rest of the district, and is entirely consistent with the comprehensive plan and the zoning code.
Oh, so just as a follow-up, this is just a conceptual plan, which means that, that whatever development occurs on that site will have to go through the planning board, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for it to be further discussed and determine what is appropriate, and that is, all of that is yet to be determined. What we're looking at is sort of, what you're looking at is more or less the concept for perhaps a maximum build out, but not this is not the ultimate build out, because that needs to be determined
That's right.
through a process.
That's right.
Okay.
Oh, I think I had more. So was seeker in effect when that area was
Oh,
taken
boy.
down?
And I'm going to guess no, but Bob might know better. I'm going to guess no.
So, you know,
Do whatever you want at that.
right. Then I just want to make sure I understand what all kind of studies have been done. And then was the subject property ever zoned for anything other than residential and kind of light commercial?
Yes, well, originally it was zoned for entirely commercial. And so the property was intended to be more or less a commercial mall area. So that was what was originally envisioned as
In 1961?
1961 as the focal point of the redevelopment of this urban renewal parcel. And that also informed, the build out of 9W, because the planners thought that there would be a lot of cars, right, coming to this area specifically.
And so they were thinking of 9W as an interstate in a sense then.
Yes.
That's why it's like it is. Okay. Do you think there would be any need for significant excavation for the construction of a building of the size or buildings of size that you're looking at?
Nothing that would be out of the ordinary in terms of construction of this type. Again, that would need to be looked at, by the sponsors of the project and engineers, right? But nothing out of the ordinary is.
You're not conceptualizing any like two stories of basement below grade or anything like that?
No.
And then, so this is something of a historic area, but can open space be designated as historic at all?
I'm not sure about that, but it certainly could be, open space could certainly have cultural significance, right, or other values, right, that are not necessarily historic.
But we don't know of any like celebrations that have traditionally taken place on that particular parcel, any stark documents that were signed there, anything like that?
No.
Well, there you go. That needs to be in the report here. And then my last question is, so there was a statement made that air quality will not be significantly affected. How was that measured?
I think, the only way that air quality might be significantly impacted in any way would be if there was some sort of noxious output associated with this development, which would require some kind of an industrial use that has some kind of an output, which is not the case with the, retail and housing that we conceptualize for the site. Yep.
Contamination of the soil.
Yep. Yep.
Contamination, that's just.
Right, so we do know that prior to urban renewal, there were a range of uses on this site, and that some of those uses included automotive uses. And so, each of the storefronts there had, different things going on. And so we do know that there were some of those uses on the site. The site isn't a brownfield in any way that we know. However, um, prior to development, there would be further environmental review and testing of the soil on the site, just to confirm what's happening exactly. Right. Mhm.
Everything would have to go through the energy code anyway. So for the air quality, the environmental, so it wouldn't, all the new buildings that are coming up in Kingston.
Right, that's right. So obviously this, project would result in increased energy use, of course, but, the buildings would have to be built to New York stretch code, so requiring a very high level of energy efficiency.
When some of those existing structures on Broadway were constructed in 1991, which is a lot more recently than I thought, did they have to undergo any remediation to your knowledge?
I don't know that answer. Yep. I could certainly look back at the records. Probably was recorded somewhere, but I'm not sure. So any other general questions on the seeker or the EAF 1, 2, 3?
I have just a few questions. One of them relates to the timeline. Now that timeline there's a timeline given of 2026 to 2029, but that could be extended. That's not a fixed timeline.
Right.
It's really just an estimated timeline
That's
that
right.
could be changed. And also in terms of existing land uses, um, the question of urban, that includes urban residential. So it's just to distinguish it from suburban residential,
That's right.
leaving it that form.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that's it. I have a few more one more question later, but other people may have questions. Go. No. Looking at the part 2 where they're listed a lot of low to moderate or no impact at all, and then a few that are just moderate. What is it that determines the difference between an overall large impact and an overall sort of no impact? What are the distinguishing
Yeah, so,
characteristics?
seeker basically says that a lead agency has to take it's called a hard look, right, at all the potential impacts and determine whether that will mean that there is a positive declaration, meaning that there's an impact on the environment, or a negative declaration, meaning that there's no potential adverse impacts on the environment. So I have here the seeker handbook in front of me. Right, so it's based on a review of the magnitude of the potential impact, right? Meaning the severity, the size, and the extent of that impact, and also the importance. So how many people are going to be impacted by that impact? What's the geographic scope of that impact? And so the Common Council in this case will have to determine and kind of weigh all these impacts in terms of making a positive or negative declaration. The seeker law, gives power to each lead agency to review these impacts because it depends on context, right? So if this was a proposal for 200 housing units right in the middle of the Catskills Preserve, it's quite likely it's going to be a positive declaration, right, in terms of impact. In this case, right, we're looking at a context of an urban district, right, and so I think there's a real difference there. So in part 2, there were some impacts that were mentioned, right. One being the impact on land and the length of construction, right, likely to be over a year. Second, that this will be visible from the historic district, right, and possibly seasonally from the creek. There will be some impact to the transportation, meaning additional cars right on the road, additional people on the sidewalks. But that impact, we do not believe will actually will degrade the network that exists, right? We discussed energy, right, that there's likely to be more energy use And we also discussed the noise and light impacts. So I think, taken together, there's, given the context and also the mitigation in place, that's would support a negative declaration in this case. Okay, so that's Resolution 11 of 2025. Okay.
I didn't see anything in the plan. Is there any, sorry about that. Has there been any discussion about altering Broadway other than curb cuts or like that? I don't recall seeing it in the plans.
No, I think that would, if there are any further further other alterations of Broadway, that would have to be reviewed, later on, once a specific project has been introduced.
Can we actually walk our way through the EAF form together just to make sure that we're all on the same page? And I just also wanted to add, it's not, when you're looking at the impact, it's not just any impact, it's significant impact. So I think that's important to consider too, as you're moving forward. So just wanted to clarify that. But if we could just go through this line by line, just to make sure we're all on the same page, and if there's any questions, I think that's important. So this is the full EAF that Bartek sent. Part 2 is what I have up, if that's okay, starting there.
Okay, so I'm just going to review this. Impact on land. Proposed action may involve construction on, physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. Yes, and the one moderate to large impact that was checked was that the project may involve construction that continues for more than 1 year or multiple phases. Impact on geological features, check no. Impacts on surface water.
Can we just stop and make sure everybody's clear with each one? So does anybody have any questions or concerns with the impact on lands, that the fact it's going to likely or could potentially take more than 1 year, and if that seems significant? Okay.
Impact on geological features based on the site itself. There are no unique or unusual landforms, so this was checked no. Impact.
All good?
All good.
Okay.
Impacts on surface water. Will this affect wetlands or other surface water bodies? This was checked no. Impact on groundwater. Given that this will use City of Kingston water, this was checked no.
Everybody good on those two?
Yes.
Impact on flooding, because this is not in the flood zone, this was checked no. Impacts on air, because this project does not include a state-regulated air emission source, this was checked no.
Everybody good on that one?
Impact on plants and animals, because this proposed project will not result in the loss of flora or fauna, this was checked no.
And there's no endangered species, bats or owls? I don't think they're endangered.
Impact on
They come to my house. I'm always throwing out my compost so they could eat.
Impact on agricultural resources, this was checked no. Impact on aesthetic resources, this was checked yes, because this project will be visible from publicly accessible vantage points, and will also be viewed, will also be seen by residents doing routine travel and also tourists that might be visiting the neighborhood.
And this is the impact on the actual project, not the construction, correct? Just saying that.
Right. Yeah, and so the mitigating factor here is that this type of development, right, is historically what was present in this neighborhood, where you had development emanating from the creek going up the hillside.
Everybody good on that?
Impact on historic and archaeological resources. This was checked yes, because this project is contiguous to the Roundout Historic District. Of course, and as we discussed this last time, the project will be subject to the form-based code and the various kind of contextual requirements of the development, which will ultimately the project will mimic the type of development that was present on the site prior. Impact on open space and recreation, because this is not designated open space, nor is it proposed to be designated open space. This was checked no.
And this will actually add some accessible open space.
That's right.
so, Yeah, it's a good impact.
Impact on critical environmental areas. This was checked no, based on it's not located in a CEA. Impact on transportation. This was checked yes. However, the impact would be small because we believe that there's existing capacity in the surrounding road network to handle increased traffic. Impact on energy. This was checked yes, because the project will include new electricity use and heating, new kind of heating and cooling of over 100,000 square feet of building area.
We just make sure that everybody's good with the transportation, because I know that's, I mean, we talked about it already briefly, but do you feel comfortable that this isn't a significant impact? Because I know some people have brought it up. I mean, for me personally, I think it's going to bring more walkability, which is the whole point of the citywide zone. Well, not the whole point, but a good chunk of the point, or percentage of the point of the citywide zoning code. And as we talked about last meeting, will also help the economics of our downtown and of course, the city of Kingston as a whole. So to me, this is a positive attribute, not positive impact. But I just wanted to stop and ask if everybody feels comfortable with that, since this is checked yes. And then you already did energy, and we already talked about that, right? So,
Yep.
Thank you.
Impact on noise, odor, and light. We also discussed this earlier. This was checked yes. However, this will be subject to noise and light controls that we already have as a city. Impact on human health. This will not introduce new sources of contamination, certainly not. So this was checked no. Consistency with community plans. We discussed this earlier. This is consistent with community plans, and so this was checked no. And finally, a consistency with community character, because this is following the zoning code. It is consistent with community character, so this was checked no.
Any thoughts, questions, concerns? Everybody agrees with the markings? Did we go through everything?
I've already had people calling me, asking if there's plans for a supermarket, which might be jumping the gun a little bit, but I assured folks that this is a golden opportunity for an entrepreneur to come in and keep people right there instead of traveling out to Hannaford or whatever. It was attempted before on the other side of the highway, but unfortunately, there really wasn't a lot of people down there to patronize it. So it's been through numerous owners over the last, 25 years. Hopefully this will, stabilize some businesses down there, with the foot traffic.
Yeah, and to add on to actual improvements that I think this will make to the community, I think it will actually have a beneficial impact on traffic, because if remain optimistic that these will be actually affordable places to live, which would increase the number of people using the UCAT service, and especially in conjunction with the development proposed at the business park, that will definitely require some rerouting of the bus and increased services, which I know all of our constituents, as well as the three business districts have been really seeking is greater bus connectivity in that area.
Yeah, another thing to think about too is bicycle infrastructure. I know part of our zoning code, there will have to be biking infrastructure for this, correct? And I think that there's bike racks downtown, like at the bottom of the hill, right?
That's right, but
So, you know,
right.
in trying to do what we can to encourage bicycling too, which, you know, it's walkable too, if you're able, but
Right, there will be required bicycle parking. Yep.
Well, I'll just say that I agree that this proposed development, I believe, will have a positive impact. So,
as beneficial impact.
sorry,
I,
yes,
I made
not
the same
positive, a
mistake.
negative,
Yes.
that's right. No, no, it will have a beneficial impact on the neighborhood and on the city.
I agree.
Yeah. So as everybody, I'm sure, remembers, this was sent back to committee at our meeting the other night. We thought this would be more beneficial for us to discuss this further before we took a vote on this. So we have a committee report that was tweaked slightly to reflect that. And it reads, "Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, determining that the acquisition and development of various properties located along Garrigan Drive will not have a potential significant adverse impact on the environment." Do I have a motion? Michelle, second. Okay, anyone else? Before I call for a vote, anything else to add? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so Resolution 12 is the findings and determination resolution for the eminent domain, proposed eminent domain action. The findings document Okay, so Resolution 12 is the findings document. This had just a few changes since we discussed it last week. And the principal change was making an update on the city's grant application to the federal government regarding 9W. And so that update was made that the city has received it and is part of the that grant is part of the overall discussion present in the document about the various infrastructure upgrades that are being made and that have been made in the neighborhood, for further supporting development of the site. Any questions on that?
Have a revised, okay? Have the revised committee report reads, "Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, authorizing the adoption and publication of the determination and findings under Section 204 of the New York Eminent Domain Procedure Law concerning the proposed condemnation of a certain real property consisting principally of 42 tax parcels and approximately 3.5 acres in connection to the project. Do I have a motion? Michael? Okay, anything further before I call for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Get late this time, so.
Bartek, since we're waiting for this to be signed, can you just step through the next steps with us that will happen?
Yes. So the next step is that the Common Council had 90 days to pass a determination and findings from the date of the public hearing, which hopefully will be fulfilled tonight. At that point, a brief synopsis of the determination and findings will be published in the Daily Freeman for 2 successive issues. Also, the current owners of the site will receive a copy of that brief synopsis, and accompanying that brief synopsis will be a letter explaining the next steps in terms of their review of the determination and findings, which they have 30 days to do. And then next, we will be getting an appraisal of the site to begin potential negotiations over an acquisition price.
Any questions? Does anybody need a break, or do you want to go right into it? Because we can, it's past 7:30, so we could either just go right into the council, or if anybody needs a break, just let me know. Get to it? Is that what I heard? All right.
But-
You want to adjourn the meeting
Yep,
first?
yep. Okay, we are adjourned, folks. Thank you.